Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning where I am. I'm just getting some things done in the garden this morning, but figured I would turn on the camera and answer one of the questions I get asked quite a bit over on Instagram. And that is, why do some of the beds in my garden have low tunnels or row covers on them? So I'll flip you around and show you. So you can see these two beds here have some low covers, some low tunnels, row covers on them, versus these other beds. I have stuff planted, but I don't have them covered. So let me first share, when do I decide to use these low tunnels in my garden? And there's really kind of two times that I use them in the garden. The first one is why I'm using both of these, and they are when I am direct sowing seeds in the garden, where the whole bed is going to really be direct sown. And typically I will use this more in the spring and the fall. And I'll get to why in a minute. The other time I use them is if I have a bed of plants, typically like plant starts that I might be planting out, that I know are going to be more prone to pest pressure. So last spring, I planted an entire bed of cabbage and broccoli. Those two plants get really bad cabbage moth damage in my area. So you'll see these two beds behind me are pretty low covered. They don't come very far off of the raised bed, and that's because I'm just using them to help me with germination when I'm direct sowing. Last spring, when I planted my broccoli and cabbage, I had those covers on a lot longer, so I used actual like PVC pipes and then covered it with initially with frost fabric, and then switched it out to like a bug netting once the temperatures got warmer. That was a much taller hoop. I actually posted a video last spring on how I set these two types of hoops up in my garden, so I will be sure to link that up top. So if you're interested in how I put them together, you can check that video out. So now, I don't know if you can hear over the traffic noise, but I'm gonna be quiet for a quick second. Do you hear all those birds? We love birds. They're great. I love seeing them in my yard. My bird bath is one of the most frequented places in my yard by the birds, along with the bird feeder. But I find that when I am direct sowing seeds, the birds know exactly where I put all of those seeds, and they dig them up. And so that's really one of the primary reasons why, when I am direct sowing, I will use these low tunnels or row covers, again, on a bed that is entirely directly sown, or if I have just smaller starts and I'm direct seeding a few things, I will put a row cover over it, because I don't know about you, but it seems like the birds know exactly where I put every single seed when I direct sow it in the garden. And the second reason why I use these row covers over seeds that I have direct sown in the garden is to protect from the crazy weather and elements that we tend to get in my growing zone, or where I'm located in the springtime in particular. So I garden in zone 5B. I am just in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And let me tell you a little bit about our spring weather. We tend to get huge fluctuations in temperature. So 3 weeks ago, it was 80 degrees for about 4 or 5 days. This week, it didn't get out of the 30s, and we had a frost a few nights this week. In a couple weeks, this week I think it's supposed to be in the 50s every day. The next week it's going to be up into the 70s. So with those temperature swings, the soil can dry out a lot quicker when we get those spikes in temperature. And when you are direct sowing seeds, you need to make sure that they have consistent moisture so that they germinate correctly. So these row covers help protect the soil from being just directly exposed to things like the sun, so that the seeds don't dry out quite as quickly. So I'll show you an example of a bed that I watered yesterday morning, and then this bed that I watered yesterday morning, sorry, the one that's uncovered, and I'll show you the difference in how the soil looks. So I watered this bed, particularly in the corners, yesterday morning because I have sown some nasturtium seeds in the corner. You can see that it looks pretty dry already. Now if I pull the soil back, it is moist down a little bit, and nasturtium seeds being bigger seeds, they're sown a little bit deeper, so I don't necessarily need to cover this one. Versus this bed that had the cover on it, you can see how much more moist the soil has remained just from having this cover over it for 24 hours. The reason I have the cover on this one is because I have seeds like dill, which is over here. I have a few rows of carrots. I have some catnip over here. I have some kale, cilantro, and spinach up in the corner here. Seeds like kale, carrots, catnip, dill, much smaller seeds. They're not planted as deep, and so being closer to the surface, they can dry out a little bit faster. So I have found over a couple years of experimentation that I get a significantly better germination rate when I put one of these row covers, low tunnels, row covers, whatever you want to call them, over the beds when I am direct sowing, more delicate seeds that aren't planted as deep. Along with the crazy fluctuations in temperatures, we also typically get some significant rain in the springtime. Now, ironically, this year it's actually been pretty dry, which makes me a little nervous for the summer, but that's another story. Now, when we do get rain, it tends to come down in buckets. We're not one of those areas, at least where I'm at, where we tend to get a nice steady rain over a few hours or a couple days. We get a lot of severe storms in the spring, and so when it does rain, it tends to come down in buckets, and it's very, we had a storm a couple weeks ago where we got 6 inches in 3 hours. So when that happens in the garden, that rain can really compact your soil, which then compacts the seeds that are in your soil, which can make them, have more trouble germinating. So the row covers, when I put them on, it kind of puts a buffer between those heavy rains and the soil. The water still can seep through, but it's not directly impacting the soil right as it comes down. So again, leads to better germination for me. The other thing that can happen with heavy rains, if your soil is not completely level, or just, again, as your soil is kind of settling in the springtime, if you've put new soil in your beds, when you get heavy rains, it can start to create kind of little rivers within your beds, and your seeds can get washed into different areas, and then when they do germinate, they're not in the same spot that you planted them. So the row covers help to make sure that the seeds stay where I intended to put them. And then the third type of, weather that can impact my germination rate in the spring particularly is the wind. Wind is obviously going to do things like move soil, but it also can dry the soil out faster. So by having these row covers over these beds, I am just providing a little bit of an extra layer of protection from some of those natural elements. So it's not directly impacting the soil when it's blowing across my bed or rain's coming down from the sky, or the sun's beating down on the bed or the soil. The row cover just gives it that little extra layer of protection, and I have found that it has significantly increased my germination rate. I am actually going to open up this other tunnel, and I'll show you what I have under there, and I'll show you what it looks like, because I'm really, again, just incredibly pleased, I'll say, with the germination that I got under that bed this spring. So in this bed, I have 4 rows of radish and 6 rows of carrots. Carrots for me are one of the hardest things to grow because the seeds are so small. You essentially have to surface sow them. I have tried all of the other methods, like putting boards over the seeds, putting a burlap sack over the seeds. But for me, the row covers are just what work the best. So let me show you the germination that I got this spring. So here are all my rows of radish that just look absolutely fantastic. And you can see that these covers do not prevent the light from coming through. So they are still developing their true leaves. They look really nice and healthy. But then this is probably the most impressive. My carrot germination. This is one of the best germination rates I have gotten as I have continued to play around with these row covers. But I have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of carrots here, and the germination looks, I would say, 90 to 100% in most cases. So those are the two reasons why I use these row covers when I am particularly direct sowing seeds in my garden. It protects them from the birds because those birds know exactly where I seem to plant everything, and it really protects from the elements, any of those extreme temperature swings, any of that heavy rain that we tend to get, or pretty significant winds that are fairly common in my area in the springtime. As I mentioned, I have a significantly higher success with my germination rate when I'm using these row covers, and I definitely will continue to use them. I don't just use them in the spring, I do use them when I'm doing some fall planting as well. So yeah, they're really versatile. You can use frost fabric like these have, or again, even insect netting in the summertime when the temperatures are a little bit warmer and you don't want to trap as much heat inside your bed. I hope this video was helpful and you learned a couple tips and tricks. If you experience any of those same struggles that I mentioned in this video when you're direct sowing your seeds in your garden, row covers might be a good solution for you. They're pretty budget friendly and pretty easy to set up. And I have found that they make a significant difference in the success of my germination when I'm direct sowing seeds. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Bye.